We are witnessing the Israeli government carry out a genocide in Gaza. Recently, the Gaza Ministry of Health released a 649-page document with the name, age, ID number of the Palestinians killed in Gaza who have been identified.
The death toll she just used has been doctored, and I can prove it.
The number of Palestinians killed by the Israeli offensive has passed
24,000 people.
I believe they're getting those numbers from the Gaza Health Ministry.
To show you how the Gaza Ministry of Health has been fudging the data, I'm going to show you a death toll that they released in April and then compare that to one that they released in September. So way back in April, the ministry released a list of people that they claimed had been killed since October the 7th. They said this was verified and included the ID numbers. It identified over 24,000 casualties. But when I analysed the list, guess what? 16% of the numbers were invalid. So what do I mean by invalid? Well, a valid ID should be an 8-digit number, which is followed by a 9th, which is used as a check digit. If the check digit doesn't match the 8 numbers, there's a special calculation that's formulated, then the ID will fail and the system will detect it as a fake. So here I am inputting a valid ID. You can see it passes. Now if they change the last digit to make it an invalid ID, you can see the system fails it. This format is meant to make it hard to fake the IDs, but I'll show you just how easy it is to bypass this in a minute. But first, back to the April list. When I used the validator on these IDs, incredibly 16% of them failed the test. This meant that none of the news agencies or governments that had been parroting the Gaza death toll had even bothered to validate the data.
The Ministry of Health in Gaza has updated the breakdown of fatalities. They gave figures for 24,686.
70% of whom were women and children.
But it got so much worse. What I uncovered next shows just how far they're willing to go to manipulate the world's perception of this conflict. A few days ago, the ministry updated the so-called verified death toll to 34,344. So, once again, I ran my checks on the new IDs, but this time only 350 of the IDs were invalid. That's just 1%. So, does this mean they're all genuine casualties now? Of course not. It's really easy to fake an ID. Let me show you what I mean. I just made up this ID number. To prove how easy they are to fake, I reverse engineered the validation process to uncover the check digit. In this case it's 2. Now watch what happens when I enter this into an online validator. Voila! A fake ID that passes the test. This probably explains how the ministry was able to go from having 16% of their IDs as invalid to just 1%. Now I was about to end the video here when it suddenly dawned on me that last time there were over 4,000 invalid IDs, but now there was only 350. What had happened to all of those dodgy IDs? So I decided to dig deeper as I wanted to know how many people from the first list were still on the new one, and what I uncovered is shocking. 4,109 people on the old list weren't on the new one. This meant that almost 20% of the dead had simply disappeared. What had happened to them? I really wanted to be charitable, so I thought to myself, maybe that in the chaos of war, mistakes had happened. Perhaps a body needed to be identified and a family member came and gave the wrong ID number, or under intense pressures at the morgue, an ID had been incorrectly copied. It's understandable that in these circumstances, records could be messy. So to see if this was the case, I checked how many of the missing people were still on the list. I did this by looking for people with the same name and age but with a different ID number, and I found a measly 241 people. That's it. Only 241 of the missing people had their IDs updated. The rest had simply disappeared. This means that almost 20% of the people that they originally claimed had been killed on that first list either never existed or had somehow miraculously come back to life. Now, I know which one my money's on, particularly as I've shown you how easy it is to fabricate an ID. It is completely in their interest to inflate the death toll to make the world think that Israel is targeting large numbers of civilians, when in reality, Israel's going to incredible lengths to minimize civilian casualties. Now, we've just exposed them disappearing over 4,000 people that they'd verified as being killed. Oh, and for the record, this is the death toll by month. If they just removed the 4,000 incorrect entries, it would have looked like this. But it never did. That never happened. They never announced a correction, and the death toll just kept on rising and rising. They were clearly doctoring the data. By the way, once you account for militants in the list, which Israel estimates at around 15,000, you're basically at a 1-to-1 civilian to militant death toll, which is why they need to doctor the numbers. If the truth got out, they'd lose all support for their cause. So if anyone is still parroting the Gaza Ministry of Health's death toll, they're either an absolute moron or an anti-Semite. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to help us make more videos like this, you can support us on Patreon.